540 hertz. Even with an impressive number like that, I was fully prepared to take a pass on this review until I saw Optimum's review of this. He strikes me as a pretty serious guy, so to see him so legitimately stoked at the experience, I knew I had to check it out. Like him, I'll tell you all the bad stuff up front. It is 24.5 inches. It is a TN panel, but it's probably way better than whatever TN you're thinking. We'll dig into that later. It's extremely expensive at $900. Now it's $300 or 50% more than the Zowie XL2566K and nearly as much as the god tier PG248QP, which is a way more versatile monitor. Oh, and it's 1080p. $900 for 1080p. I can already see the comments. People already don't like the Zowie at $600. So it should be obvious, this is not a very versatile monitor. This is aimed squarely at the competitive FPS crowd. I want to start this off a little different today because I feel like this gets glossed over in reviews a lot for high refresh stuff where people say like, oh, it can't play AAA single player games, but it can play competitive FPS titles that can run this high. But which competitive FPS titles actually can run this high? Call of Duty is my main game. I run minimum graphic settings to milk it for every frame I can because I play at 1440p. On my Intel 13900K in a 4080 Founders Edition, it benchmarks at like 200 frames. I find I get a lot higher performance just in actual gameplay versus the benchmark, but it still struggles to break like 260 FPS consistently. It's not like this is the most beastly rig out there. It's no slouch, but it is important to point out that it is still running DDR4 memory. At least for now. So I wasn't expecting miracles, but I fired it up on this monitor in 1080p and I only pulled down about 250 FPS in the benchmark, around 300-ish in game. Shit. I asked Asus if they had anything in the 4090 department I could borrow for this video because I really wanted to try to max this thing out, and shockingly, they sent this, which I don't get to keep. This is the ROG Matrix RTX 4090, and it's probably the most overkill card on the market right now. It's priced at a heart-stopping $3,199. That's double the price of the 4090 Founders. This has a 360 AIO attached to it, and it's gorgeous. It begs to be showed off, and there's no way it's gonna fit in my Fractal Design North, so my friends over at Height sent out the Y70 Touch in black. It's got this huge 4K vertical touchscreen in the front. This case is crazy. It's gorgeous. It's the perfect home for this Matrix 4090. I've got big plans for this case. So COD with the 4090 saw the bench top out at 284 FPS with a hard 99% limit on the CPU and plenty of unused GPU power. Looking at Quake Champions and Apex, those are both hard locked at 300 FPS with no apparent way to unlock them, so neither of them are gonna do this. In Fortnite, running on low settings, I pulled between like 480 and 565 most of the time. We're talking potato graphics though. Not even rendering at the full 1080, and here I would definitely prefer to have lower FPS and better graphics because this made targets at a distance really tough. Rainbow Six puts up an impressive 574 FPS average at medium details and 625 at low settings on the 4080. The 4090 sees 619 on medium and 688 on low. Wild swings though, anywhere from like 380 to north of 1000. In Halo Infinite, low settings average like 375 FPS. Max is like 415, 420, and the only time I saw it above 500 was in the menus. CS2 is a case of yes, but low settings for sure, and it still depends wildly on the map and the game mode. In Deathmatch, I saw performance anywhere from like 330 all the way to 700 plus. In a 5v5 comp, it rarely dipped below 540 and it got as high as like 780. Again, wild swings. Disabling the E-cores on my processor didn't do anything to boost the situation, and neither did the 4090. At 1080p with low settings, we're CPU bottlenecked. Overwatch 2, regardless of the card, I get between 300 and 560 on high. Now lowering to medium or low settings, you basically raise the minimum, but not much impact to the maximum. Valorant, yeah, easy. No problem hitting 700, 800 plus in game on low settings. Medium is like 560 to 750. Still swings wildly. At high settings on the 4090, you can hit 540, but you're not gonna do it consistently. So going into 2024, only a handful of games can really take advantage of 540 hertz. They all have to be low settings, and none of them can run a locked 540, which will be important later. For me, only Valorant, CS2, Overwatch, and Rainbow Six provide any meaningful experience at 540 over what you'd get at 360. Your mileage may vary based on your rig, like if you're running DDR5 memory with this Intel processor, or if you're running like an AMD 7800 X3D, for instance, but it still feels like a pretty narrow use case. But how does it feel when you can actually hit 540? I'll tell you later. For the 7 of you still watching this video, hit that subscribe button for me, and let's talk about about this monitor. In terms of design language, this is very similar to the PG248QP, so you still have a very aggressive gamery design on the back, still have the RGB logo that can be disabled, no carry handle like we see on the Zowie, but you do have a 1/4-inch mount up here for a camera, which is nice. The stand is pretty interesting. It's like this batarang type design where you can spread the feet wide or tuck them in for more of a Millennium Falcon type shape. It allows you to get this monitor really close without stepping on your mouse pad or being in the way of your keyboard. It's basically like a full sweat configuration. You still get height, tilt, and swivel, and it's very stable. Out of the box, the max refresh rate is 500 Hz. You'll have to go into the on-screen display and overclock this to 540. And to do that, you'll need a current build of Windows 11, and you'll have to have at least a 20 series GPU. We also have a true G-Sync module in here, and we've got NVIDIA Reflex latency testing, and this does have a DyAc that feeds a headphone out. There is an option to feed it via USB for higher res audio and even some like FPS specific modes. Even using some really high quality, easy to drive headphones, I wasn't really impressed with that. Some of the competitive FPS modes made the audio in Call of Duty sound completely bizarre. I would only use this if you have no other option for audio. Just to adjust the volume, you have to go in like 2 or 3 menus deep. It's just cumbersome. If you have enough money for a panel like this and a decent rig to push this, you probably have DAC amp money. Not only is this monitor fast in its refresh rate, but the gray to gray response times are pretty nutty. I tested all the overdrive modes, and I think normal is the way to go. You can get a little hint of speed going to esports mode, but then you double the overshoot, and 1.16 milliseconds is dumb fast anyway. It is faster than the XL2566K as well by like 0.4 milliseconds, so technically faster, probably nothing you're gonna notice. Nonetheless, really fast panel. I also ran down all the common refresh rates from 540 all the way down to 120 and 60 Hz, just in case you find yourself using a console with this panel, and the performance and the speed stays really impressive all the way through that range. If you are planning to use a console in addition to your PC with this, it is really important to point out that the HDMI ports here are only 2.0. You don't really need 2.1, but it would have been really nice to see for future proofing given the $900 price point. Input latency is pretty comparable between the Zowie and this panel at 360 Hz, with the Asus edging slightly by 0.4 milliseconds. Taking it up to 540 Hz though, we see a clear advantage to the Asus. I spend a lot of time gaming, usually at least a couple hours a day, and when I'm not doing that, I'm editing videos or editing thumbnails or doing something that requires my hands to be on a keyboard and a mouse a lot. A few months back, I started developing a lot of wrist pain in my mouse hand. I went and got an MRI. The doctor told me I was a strong candidate for surgery because there's some arthritis in there. He told me I was gonna have to scale back either at the gym or in doing things that required the use of a mouse. Neither of those were really acceptable solutions for me. And I'd seen these little supports sitting behind people's mice in like setup videos. I was skeptical, but I reached out. This is called a Carpio 2.0 by Delta Hub, and they're sponsoring today's video. The idea is that it elevates your wrist and holds it in a better position. And this thing right here works. I've been using this for months before I felt comfortable doing a sponsor spot about this. This has made a huge difference for me. First off, they come in some of the coolest packaging I've ever seen, and it's a really simple device. The bottom is PTFE, like mouse skates, and the top is silicone. All you do is just drop the back of your palm right in and hold your mouse like normal. Now you've got a better wrist position, and I move my wrist a lot less because there's less friction, so I'm engaging my whole arm easier. They do make these in a gaming version that has this little seat belt for those times when you pick up your mouse, and a left-hand version as well. I usually go without this for gaming and use it for all of my productivity work. Obviously, I'm not a doctor or a physical therapist. All I can tell you is that it worked for me. It has completely alleviated my wrist pain. If you're having wrist issues and you're having to cut back on things that are really important to you, I urge you to check this out. Just click the link down in the description to check out the Carpio 2.0 and take advantage of their holiday deals. Being able to achieve that refresh rate and those transition times is cool, but not if it comes with a lot of trade-offs, like if the colors are washed, if there's really bad ghosting or overshoot. And to Asus's credit, none of that is true here. When I said this looks way better than your average TN panel, here's what I meant by that. The color calibration from the factory is solid. Mine measured out at 6200K with 6500K being ideal, so none of the colors looked off to me at all, but you can go in there and dial them in even further if you need to. The contrast ratio is bananas at 1227/1. Compare that to the Zowie at 948/1. The Zowie is decent for a TN. The Asus is very impressive. Color coverage in sRGB mode is 96.4% versus the Zowie at 92.7%. Now the Zowie edges the Asus in DCI-P3, but the Asus has a wide gamut mode, which I really didn't expect to see, and wow, 99.6 sRGB coverage and 89.4 DCI-P3. That's nearly the color coverage of the PG248QP, which is an IPS panel. So again, when I say it's not your average TN panel, it's not. Viewing angles are still really rough, but given the use case, I would imagine you're gonna have your face glued right to this thing, so I see it as a non-issue. The brightness is solid. Max brightness with no motion blur enabled is 443 nits versus the Zowie at 344. I don't personally like, nor do I recommend anything under 250, but your mileage may vary with that. In comparison to the XL2566K, I think that despite the wide gamut mode on the Asus, the colors look a little punchier on the Zowie. It has a color vibrance slider in the menu too, which you can use to push the colors even more. Now, it's not as accurate as the Asus, so I would be careful about producing content on it, but for the use case, which is gaming, I think more people would probably prefer the saturated colors. I also noticed the pixels more on the Asus. It sticks out as a reminder that this is a 1080p because I'm not used to being able to see the pixels on my displays. I don't find this to be as pronounced on the Zowie. This monitor does have ULMB2, that's NVIDIA's backlight strobing motion blur reduction technology, and in most of my tests, I feel like this beats DyAc. Remember that ULMB2 and variable refresh rate tech can't be used at the same time. For this reason, it's been tough to take advantage of this on the AMD side. There are a couple workarounds now. It is much easier on this panel than it was on the PG248QP. I don't personally own any AMD cards, so I will link a really detailed video from Monitors Unboxed because I don't want to just copy their homework. Once you've got ULMB2 activated, you've got a couple options you can tweak in here, but the important one is called pulse width. This basically controls the length of the strobe. What this is a scale where the lower you take the number, you get little incremental or very minor improvements to the blur reduction, but it comes at the cost of brightness. Now, I will say that the stock 100% looks totally fine to me, and as you get into the lower numbers, you're going to incur massive hits to brightness. If you're going to run ULMB2, and you should, this is how you should control the brightness of your monitor. Go into the brightness setting, set that all the way to 100, then go back to your pulse width and lower that number until you land on a number where the brightness looks good for you. The sweet spot for me is 80. That puts me right at about 260 nits of brightness, but you can adjust that however you want. Here's the difference it makes with ULMB2 off and the overdrive mode set to normal, which we figured is the best performance mode, next to ULMB2 on. I'm pretty sure this image speaks for itself. When compared to the DyAc Plus premium mode on the XL2566K, I feel like this kind of speaks for itself too. The black lines on the spaceship are more connected vertically on the Zowie, but the total image is much sharper on the Asus. Because this is TN, it's got no problem at all punching in those blacks, and I think most people would agree that the image on the left is the superior image. It's important to point out that backlight strobing technology works best when the FPS of your game is at a 1-to-1 ratio as the refresh rate of your monitor. For example, if your game is outputting a hard-locked 240 FPS and your monitor is set to 240 Hz, that's going to give you less artifacting and less crosstalk than having your monitor set to 540 Hz and having your game FPS all over the place anywhere from 300 to 540. The reason why that's so important is because on the Asus, ULMB2 isn't even available until 360 Hz and up. Over on the Zowie side, you can engage DyAc Plus as low as 100 Hz. So what was my experience at 540 really like? It was good. It was smooth. It was really fast. It wasn't the mind blower that I thought it would be. I could probably tell the difference between 540 and 360 if I played a title that could really take advantage of 540 for 2 or 3 weeks and then step down to a lower refresh rate. That's when I usually see the difference in refresh rate, is stepping down from a higher one. Maybe, and that's not throwing shade at anybody. It's just that the game that I spend playing week in and week out can't really take advantage. If I played something that really could, I probably would have seen more or been able to do a better job of picking out subtleties in the experience. If you're heavy into Valorant, CS2, Overwatch 2, you played a crazy high level and you've got super deep pockets, this is probably the best monitor on the market right now for performance FPS. If you're just an enthusiast, budget's a little bit tighter, I have a really hard time recommending this over the Zowie. I mean, yes, the colors are more accurate, the response times are better, the motion blur reduction technology is better, there's an actual G-Sync module in here, and obviously the refresh rate is higher. All those things are true, but is it enough to be the factor that makes you play better? Is it enough to justify the $300 difference between $600 and $900? That's tough. It's worth saying too that I don't think the 4090 is the right fit for chasing down high frames at 1080p. Most of the games we saw that could take advantage of 540 Hz find themselves CPU bottlenecked anyway, especially when you strip back all the graphics settings to achieve those frames. For everyone else out there that plays anything else at all, I don't think this monitor makes any sense. Not when the absolute powerhouse PG248QP is just $100, $150 higher, and it's 27 inches, 1440p IPS with ULMB2 as well. That's still my recommendation if you play a lot of single player stuff but are are still really into competitive FPS. If you play a lot of single player and you're more of a casual FPS player, OLED is still the way. The infinite contrast and image quality is just crazy. It just performs worse in motion blur. Honestly, digging into this video and figuring out that my main game runs more comfortably right around 240 FPS, it'll probably have me switching back and forth between the OLED and the AQN again for a while. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you all in the next one. Stay up.